Jesse Stilwell. This man is incredible. Jesse started at 538 pounds, and over the course of 2 years, he's lost 280 pounds. Not only has Jesse lost a bunch of weight, he's also started to change his life around and confront his fears. If you're looking for inspiration, this is the interview for you. Here's the introduction. Oh, and he did it eating eggs, bacon, and pork chops. And his cholesterol improved. All right, folks, today we're talking to Jesse Stilwell. I heard of Jesse through the Photocracy website. His username on there is Vainglory, and he was spotlighted because, Jesse, you've lost like 270 or 280 pounds now?
279 pounds, but I've gained a little since then.
Okay. Still incredible, though.
I stopped for a little bit to give my metabolism time to catch up.
Okay.
Because I had heard too many stories of people losing a bunch of weight and then rubber banding back up.
Mm-hmm.
And so about the time I started CrossFit, I started eating more because the first time I did CrossFit, afterwards I was completely and utterly drained, and I attributed it to the calorie deficit I was eating at. And through my work, I was lucky enough to have access to DEXA scans, which is, I don't know if you've heard of them. They're like, it's like radiography, but it gives you your bone density, your entire body makeup. And so 3 months ago, I got my first one. And then I just recently in March got my next one, and I was up 14 pounds of lean mass and down 5 pounds of fat. And that's what I've been doing. Like, I gained weight just because I think that I was retaining water due to the lean mass.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't really trying to cut, but I'm back to trying to cut again. So
Okay.
I'm actually back down to like 261, 262. But I think my last weight that I put on Photocracy was 259. So I'm almost back to where I was about 3 months ago. But I've got more lean, like, I could see more definition in my arms and stuff, definitely.
Was CrossFit something you started recently? Because didn't you use like a strong lift type program initially?
Yeah, initially I started on a 5x5, a modified 5x5 Rippetoe starting strength type thing.
Mm-hmm. And
I started lifting like 3 days a week. Eventually I moved up to 4 days a week, and then I found 531 by Jim Wendler, and I used that for a long time. And the reason I used that is because I was a shut-in. I had agoraphobia, and I wouldn't go to the gym. Even if I didn't have agoraphobia, I don't think I would have gone to a gym anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're that big, you're just paranoid all the time. So I just felt like people were staring at me anyway, so the gym's the last place I wanted to go. So I started off with, I had 20-pound dumbbells that my wife had, and I started off with those, doing like flies and presses and stuff, curls too, I think, and body weight squats, which was hard, but you would expect it to be hard because I was like 500 pounds at the time.
Yeah. Jesse, was this initially when you first got into the whole like weight loss journey?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this was about like almost 2 years ago then?
Yeah. 2 years would have been in March. I'm not sure what day I started on specifically. I know that I started logging on April 15th.
Okay, and your starting weight was 500 and how many pounds?
38.
Okay, so 538. Okay, so the first thing that you really tried was, you took your wife's weights and you kind of, were you following a plan when you were doing that, or were you just doing whatever exercises you could think of?
I was, I'd gone to exrx.net,
mm-hmm.
and I was looking at dumbbell exercises, and I just kind of went through and picked some and started doing them. We were really poor at the time because single income, I didn't have a job or anything. And when you don't really care if you're alive, you tend to accrue debt. Mm-hmm. So that we had a lot of debt. And a lot of it was from food and stuff, but basically I just hit a hole and decided to change. So we were poor. I probably couldn't have afforded a gym, so I just took what was near me. I think at one point I actually filled a backpack with all the weights that we had in the house to deadlift. It came out to like 85 pounds. She was afraid that the stitching on the backpack wouldn't hold.
Yeah.
And then it was going to ruin our floor.
All
which
right.
is probably accurate because it was kind of hairy, but I only did that for a few weeks. And then my brother was nice enough to get me a bench, so we put that in my guest room, and that's when it really started. When I started 5x5, and then eventually Wendler's 531.
Okay, so take us through like the timeline of events, sort of, between when you started working out just with like your wife's dumbbells to the point where you started the 5x5 programming. Was there like a couple months there in between?
I believe so. It's weird. I haven't really gone back. I have everything logged, but I really haven't gone back and looked through exactly what I did in a while.
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of been treating every day, kind of not been looking back in the past too much.
Yeah.
But I do have it all logged, but I couldn't tell you. I could guess that I probably did the dumbbell stuff for about a month and a half, 2 months maybe. And then my brother was nice enough to get me a bench. It was pretty cheap on Craigslist, and he picked it up on his way down to visit. And that's when I started 5x5. There was a user on the forum that I was on. It was somethingawful.com, and that's where I started my fitness log.
Okay.
And that's really where I found the mega thread that changed everything for me, and it was a low-carb mega thread. But I don't like telling people that there's any one diet to follow, but the thread itself kind of broke down some stuff about the body that I didn't understand at the time. And I have attention issues, and the thread broke it down in a way that I was able to understand it. So more than the diet itself, I think that the insight that the thread offered me to what my body was doing with food pretty much saved my life. And it was just on a random comedy forum in a sub forum that barely got used. Mm-hmm. It's kind of weird how that works, but
yeah. And I checked out that thread as well, and that was like, I saved that to go back to, because like, there's studies. Like, the guy wasn't just like saying, oh, do this. He was actually saying, this is how it works, and here's the studies behind this, and here's the studies behind that. That's a really cool thread. And so as far as exercise, like, you went to the 5x5 programming. How many months did you do that for? And then also, what kind of progress were you seeing? And then the other question I want to ask you is, when did you discover this low carb thread and this whole diet, and integrate that into the whole programming and everything?
For the 5x5, I did that for maybe 5 or 6 months. And the funny thing is, I didn't see any progress.
Okay.
Because I had what you would call fat guy strength. So I started off strong, and I knew that eating in a calorie deficit was going to cause me to waste muscle, because I was eating at a pretty big deficit.
Mm-hmm.
I think I started off at 2,500 calories. My BMR had me at like, the basal metabolic rate had me at like 5,500 just to maintain. Yep. So I was eating well under what I probably should have been eating, but I needed to cut weight quickly. So I knew when I started lifting that I was going to be wasting muscle. It was a foregone conclusion, but I also knew that loose skin was going to be an issue. So I knew if I didn't do something, if I didn't try to maintain some muscle or even build some muscle, that I would have like a crap load of loose skin. And I didn't want that, because at the time I knew I was too poor for the skin surgery. So like I was on a poor man's diet, trying to basically save all the money that I could. And it worked out pretty well. I have some loose skin, but just until recently, actually, I didn't really see any gains. Mm-hmm. There was losses the whole way down, but it was firmly in my mind that the gains I would get would be from life, and that the lifting would work towards those gains rather than strength gains. I knew I was going to lose strength the whole way down. Like, for instance, at some point in the high 400s, I deadlifted 310, which is every plate that I had.
Yeah. But
then right before I started CrossFit, I think I was deadlifting 230 or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that was when I was on 531. which I picked 531 because I knew that I probably wouldn't gain strength, but I also knew that if I injured myself, that it would be bad. And 531 kind of lends itself to like a slow crawl type of gain.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that lifting at a percentage of my maxes would reduce the ability for me to injure myself. So that's kind of where I picked 531 from. Aside from the fact that it's an amazing book. I don't know if you've ever read it.
I haven't, but I did. I just tweeted, I think, a couple days ago about a post that Jim Wendler wrote on T-Nation. I don't know if you saw that, but it was like all the things he wished he had told himself when he was younger. And it was a really good post.
I think I saw the link, but I didn't click on it. I read a lot of crap every day.
Yeah.
Like 10, 15 blogs. And sometimes I miss stuff that I need to not miss. And T-Nation, I read a lot of stuff from T-Nation. Like on my new blog redesign, I think I link like 3 or 4 articles from them.
Okay.
But I am kind of a Wendler fanboy, so
yeah.
If you want to toss me that link, I'd be down with that.
Yeah, I will after the interview. So when you were doing the 5x5 programming, before you got into 531, you said you were kind of on a poor man's diet and you were eating at a caloric deficit. What were you eating, like the low carb? It's almost like a paleo type diet from that thread.
Well, I started low carb. We'll go back to the beginning. It's not a long story.
Okay.
My wife, we got a scale with a tax return in March of 2010 because I thought I was well over 600.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a scale that could weigh up to 750. And I stepped on it, and that's when I saw how heavy I was, but I was actually kind of relieved because I wasn't over 600. And my wife at the time had just gotten like a printout from one of her coworkers, and I'm not sure, but I think it was a South Beach diet printout.
Okay.
It's basically like a low carb thing, and I said, screw it, I'll just try it and see what happens. And I tried it for a week, and I lost 10 pounds, and that's when I sort of started looking around because I get obsessed about stuff. Like, that's where a video game addiction came from, and that's where, I don't know, all of my addictions come from. I get obsessed. So I started looking at weight loss stuff because I wanted to learn why that happened. And I found that mega thread during that process. And I started a low-carb diet based on information I found there. I didn't start off ketogenic at first. I just started off eating at a calorie deficit and not eating junk food. So I would still be under 100 grams of carbs a day, but for a long while there, I would eat, I would have like a muffin every morning.
Okay.
With some eggs on it and cheese and stuff. And I was still having carbs. But as time went on, I started, I wanted to be like, I wonder how many carbs I could get away with. Like how many carbs can I eat and still be happy? So I just started removing carbs, and eventually I just ended up ketogenic. And as time progressed, I'm a binge eater. I think I have an actual food addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And some foods will trigger me to binge eat. And over time, I would just remove those triggers that I found. Like peanut butter was one. Peanut butter is completely fine on a low carb diet, but I noticed that when I ate it, I would keep eating it, and I couldn't stop. So I tossed that out of my diet. Eventually, the process led me to toss so much stuff out of my diet that I just kind of ended up paleo.
Okay.
Because all of my trigger foods ended up being like, it would be oatmeal would be one, because I couldn't have it without raisins or it would make me retch. So oatmeal got tossed. Cheese I couldn't eat with any sort of control. Like if I got a block of cheese, that would be gone. And so I just ended up throwing out legumes and beans and rice, and everything just kind of went out the door, and I ended up paleo. And that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Okay. And the paleo, I forget because I didn't fully read that low carb thread, But was he basically advocating a paleo type of diet in that thread, or was it just no carbs or low carbs?
No, in that thread, he was advocating a high fat. I think he was advocating a ketogenic diet, but not really, because I think people are afraid to tell people to get on ketogenic diets. But he kind of hinted at it through the whole thread, but mostly said stay under 100 grams of carbs and you're on a low carb diet. Okay. Actually, he gave like 3 levels. There's 100 grams of carbs, which is a standard low carb diet. Then under 50 was a ketogenic, like a very low carb diet. And then there was like no carb, which was, I don't remember what he called it, but I could never pull that one off.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, because you got into CrossFit, I watched a lecture by Dr. Matthew Lalonde. Lalonde, I don't know if you've heard of him. And he was basically talking about, he was doing like intense Metcons, like CrossFit workouts, and he was at that time like eating like, I don't know, like 60 to almost 70% fat in his diet, and the rest was pretty much protein, very little carbs. And he said something like his glucose stores in his body or something were getting so depleted during those Metcons that after one of them he thought he was going to faint pretty much. Glycogen stores, yes. Yeah.
I noticed the exact same thing. And it's weird, there's like a divide on the internet between CrossFit and lifters. And I wanted to clear that up if this gets seen by lifters who are like, well, why would you go from 5x5 or 531 to CrossFit? And it's because I was agoraphobic for 10 years. Okay. And that social interaction is something, it's part of my transformation process. And if I just went into a gym, I knew I wasn't going to talk to other lifters. Whereas CrossFit kind of forces you into this sort of group thing, but it's not like a crappy group class where you're running or prancing around with like 1 pound dumbbells and stuff. Yeah. They actually give you real weight. So that's why I got into CrossFit, and I noticed the exact same thing. So it's true. And I think I was watching a video with Alan Aragon that kind of opened my eyes on it. And it was that I was working out fasted for 1. I was on a ketogenic diet for 2, and apparently that is a recipe for disaster. Because if you get into an anaerobic state, that's the only time on a ketogenic diet that you're going to use glycogen. And CrossFit basically survives on their ability to put you in an anaerobic state, and very quickly. So the entire class, I just start off using this glycogen that I don't have because I'm training fasted for 1, and I'm on a ketogenic diet, so I don't have glycogen stores anyway. So I had to start doing stuff like I would do dextrose. I would do like 10 grams of dextrose in a shake before I worked out. Okay. And then I'd start supplementing Syntha 6 afterwards, because it was a fairly clean powder that I found that had some carb in it. So.
All right. So we were talking about Syntha 6. You started supplementing with that pre-workouts.
That's post.
That's post-workouts, okay. Yeah. And then the pre-workout was the dextrose. And did you do like a protein in there, or was it just dextrose?
I would do some Extend BCAA powder, and I would just throw some dextrose in there.
Okay, so how did that work out for you?
It seemed to work.
Yeah.
I wasn't hitting a wall anymore.
Okay.
And my wife is on the same sort of diet, and she was noticing that throughout the day after CrossFit, because she's doing it with me, but throughout the day after CrossFit, she would feel drained. And we started doing Syntha with her as well, and throwing some dextrose in a pre-workout for her, and that drain feeling went away. Yeah. So my guess was, like you said, I can't remember the gentleman's name that you brought up, but my guess was that I was using the very little glycogen that I had, and then I was just dead for the rest of the day, and I wasn't putting it back in. So as soon as we started doing those 2 things, it got better. So yeah, I think he's completely right.
so that's about where you're at right now. You've started taking up CrossFit, and then you're doing those two things to counter the glycogen store depletion.
Yes.
That's going on. Okay. So for someone that's not familiar with like a low carb type diet or even a paleo type diet, can you take us through like what a day is in food for you? Like what you eat for breakfast? Do you have a breakfast? Do you do intermittent fasting? Like anything like that?
I used to do intermittent fasting, but when I got a job, I couldn't do it anymore because I have to do CrossFit at 6:15 a.m. So my window was starting to look like I would eat at 5, and then my window would close at like 1 p.m. And I'm the cook of the house a lot of nights. So what would happen is that my window would close at 1 p.m. and then I'd make like a pound of bacon at 5 p.m. that I couldn't touch. And I was having trouble with that. But no, my coworkers laugh at me because a day of food for me is kind of ridiculous. Like I start with my shake before CrossFit, and I have a post-workout. And then usually I don't eat again until lunchtime. Okay. And at that point, that's when the coworkers laugh at me because I'll come in with like 3 pork chops and 8 eggs, and that's it. I'm simple. I don't do any like recipe style cooking. I just eat ingredients basically. Mm-hmm. Because it's easier for me, and it's easier for me to control my calories that way. And I've always found that to be the case. When you start mixing calories, when you start doing like dishes that have a lot of stuff in them, I find it hard to track the calories and that sort of thing. Yeah. Especially when I'm having to break it down into different portions. So, like the night before, I'll make my lunch, and it'll be something like that. It'll be like 3 pork chops and 8 eggs, and I can deal with that because I'm still kind of big. And as I get smaller, the number is going to go down. It'll be like 2 pork chops and 6 eggs, and so on and so forth. But and then around 6 p.m. I'll cook dinner, and it'll be the same sort of thing, except there'll be like that's another. I bring broccoli with me to work. Okay. In those like microwavable steamer bags. Mm-hmm. And I'll have one of those, and then for dinner I'll have like half a pound of broccoli and more meat. That's my simple diet.
Are people shocked when you tell them like the type of foods that you just mentioned your coworkers are like, what is going on? But like you just said you'll eat like a pound of bacon as well, right? Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, you're eating all this stuff, and I'm the same way. I eat like 6 eggs in the morning, pound of bacon and everything, but to eat that sort of food, it's like every article you read in like magazines and the news is like, don't eat meat, don't eat tons of fat, like it's gonna like just make you blow up. But the exact opposite has happened with you. Yeah, and that's one of the things about that mega thread that started me off, is that it went into the lipid hypothesis that our food pyramid's based on. Mm-hmm. And it's got multiple sources that debunk what that guy was saying. Like all of our science is based on all of the food regulations in this country are based on, and basically what all the doctors are taught are based on this lipid hypothesis that's crap. And I'm not cool enough to be able to tell you why it's crap, but you can Google it and figure out very quickly that it is crap. Yes. And that was enough for me when I got started. And it's been enough since. Like I said, it was a poor man's style diet. I was kind of, when I started, I just kind of threw my arms back and I let the world come at me. I didn't go to a doctor. I had no clue what state I was in health-wise, and I just kind of latched on to something and said, screw it, and gave it a shot. But 5-6 months ago, I got labs drawn for the first time because I started working for this clinic. Mm-hmm. And they do this sort of thing. They do nutrition counseling and weight loss and just general wellness and stuff. So the doctor that I work for drew my labs, and they were perfect across the board. Like after 2 years of this ketogenic diet,
my health was absolutely perfect. And I wish I had labs from when I had started, because I have no baseline. I have zero knowledge of what it was, but it couldn't have been good, man. Based on what I was eating, it couldn't have been good.
And for the past 2 years, you've essentially been eating, like, how many eggs a day, would you say?
It varies, but I'll tell you, we went to Walmart last week and bought 4 cartons of 18, and we just had to go to Sam's Club to buy 2 more.
Oh, yeah? I
go through eggs. That's like the base of my diet, essentially, because they're cheap.
And then all the doctors will say, oh, don't eat eggs, the cholesterol in eggs, but...
Then I hold up my labs, and I'm like, no.
What's that?
Then I hold up my labs, and I'm like, no.
Yeah, not true, right?
No, not true.
Well, you know what? I've come across a bunch of different websites, too, that talk about eggs and cholesterol and how dietary cholesterol doesn't have that big of a deal on your actual cholesterol levels. It's actually like sugary grain, like donuts and stuff, that are negative towards that. And we'll post those threads in below so people can see that sort of thing as well. The last thing I want to ask you, Jesse, is like the problem that a lot of people have losing weight is like sticking to the diet or sticking to like the workouts or whatever they're doing. How did you overcome that? Like, what motivated you to keep going for 2 years now?
I get that question often, and I can never really answer it. A lot of people tell me I'll have willpower or something, or they'll attribute it to some like cosmic force, but I think it's just belief. Like, I think I hit such a bad place in my life where it was rock bottom, and I started thinking about all the things that I could never do, because I've always been big. And I had trouble, like, I can remember back to when I was 12 years old, they had the special order, like, baseball uniforms for me. I've always been big, and I've never been able to experience life like someone who fits in. And I'd always felt like I had these eyes on me whenever I stepped outside. So I started taking a list of the things that I couldn't do or never could do that I wanted to do. And that was kind of my jumping off point. And I think as I went along, I didn't really have any goals. And I think that's where a lot of people might get into trouble. And I wasn't trying to be perfect. And I think that's another place where a lot of people get in trouble, because you can chase perfection without trying to be perfect. And I don't know if that makes sense, but if you're trying to be perfect, then a lot of the times the very split second that you aren't perfect, you put it together in your head that I'm not perfect anymore, therefore I can never be perfect. And then you fall off the wagon. So the whole time I kind of came at it from a different viewpoint. I wasn't trying to be perfect. I kind of embraced my weakness and my humanity, and I was like, I'm going to screw up. And if I'm going to be successful, what I need to do is figure out what screwed me up and fix that, instead of dwelling on the fact that I screwed up. And I think that's where a lot of people have issues. And I'm not a step on the scale every day sort of guy. And I think a lot of people do that too. And especially in our clinic, like, I'll help people with their nutrition, and they'll step on the scale every day, and they'll be like, when I come in here and step on the scale, it's weird because yesterday I weighed 3 extra pounds. And the thing is that you get to a point where, well, at least for me, I'd done it so long that I stopped thinking about the time that it was taking, and just started looking at the things that I would get when I was done. And when you weigh yourself in every week, you start thinking of your weight loss in terms of weeks, because it's human to put structure to everything. So just like the sun revolves, we eventually figure out we revolve around the sun rather, or the moon revolves around us. We eventually figure out the timing, and you do the same thing when you're dieting. It becomes a week, and then that can sabotage you, because a lot of the times you'll weigh in, and then a lot of the times people put their cheat meals like on the day they weigh in, so they can recover before their next weigh-in.
Mm-hmm.
Thing is, if they don't recover by their next weigh-in, it might ruin them for that entire week. They might think, oh, I'm already screwed up this week, I'll just cheat some more. And then that's when people backslide too. So I think the key to my success was I stopped thinking about my weight loss in terms of time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not a week-to-week thing, it's a year-to-year thing, or a couple years to couple years thing, instead of just dwelling on every single mistake that I make in a week. And it's worked for me.
Okay. You said your wife too, she was eating similar to you, and she's also joined you with CrossFit. Has she had like a good influence on you as well?
Yeah. Like I said, she's the reason I started, I guess, because her coworker had given her a diet to try, and she was 300 pounds at the moment, at the time that we started.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been I don't want to tell you how much she is now, because ever since I started, I've been trying to separate myself from her weight loss, because I think that's another mistake that people make.
They compare against others?
They compare, and when it's woman to man, I'm not sexist or anything, but it's no competition.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a man will lose more weight, and it's just biology. I would sit there and lose like 10 pounds in a week, and she would do the same thing and lose like 2.
Okay.
And it's just simple biology, and you can't, and I very early on figured out that we couldn't compete, or else we were both gonna, like, it was either gonna tear our marriage apart, or it was gonna screw up both of our diets. So, and she's shy like I am anyway, so I've been trying to kind of separate her from the online portion. So I'll tell you that she started at 300 and that she's not 300 anymore.
Okay, well, that's all that matters, right? She's on the journey.
Yeah.
Well, good. Jesse, it's been a pleasure talking to you, man.
Yeah, Spencer.
I think a lot of people have learned a lot. And your blog, it's sorry, what was the URL again?
It's foodisforfuel.com, and it's really ugly right now, but on the 15th I'm relaunching it. It's going to be prettier.
On the 15th, okay.
Yes, sir.
A few days from now. All right, perfect.
Sunday.
By the time this is up, we'll probably put this up in like 2.5 weeks, so your website will be up and people will be able to check it out.
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, Jesse, have a nice day, brother.
All right, Spencer. It was nice talking to you. Thanks.
You too, man.
All right. Hope you enjoyed that interview. As always, to hear more, go to bodyhack.com, click the link to the blog. And if you know anyone with a good story, maybe they lost a bunch of weight, maybe they really know what they're talking about, or they're doing some crazy thing that we'd probably be interested in, go ahead and send me an email, spencer@bodyhack.com. Until I see you guys next time, take care, have fun, train hard. That's it. Bye-bye.